through indulgence in sin, self-respect is destroyed. And when that is gone, respect for others is lessened. So when sin is cherished, it can, in the end, produce nothing but unhappiness.
Welcome to Mission 66, a ministry of TWR and Dr. Luis Sayao. Today, we're in the book of 1 Kings and the royal court of David and Solomon. You can follow along with your downloadable study guide. Pick it up at mission66.org. Let's join teacher John Matthews and co-host Esther Sisulu for our discussion.
Welcome to our chapter-by-chapter journey in the Bible. This is where we get to read it and then glean what lessons we can learn from it. Now, currently, we are looking at the book of 1 Kings, covering a historical period in ancient Israel known as the monarchy. Now, all was not well in the ancient kingdom because tribal and religious differences caused strife and discontentment. Now, today, our narrative continues with our teacher, John Matthews, bringing us the theme, A Study in Contrast.
Yeah, Esther, thank you so much, and good to be with you, and a very warm welcome to Mission 66. Great to have your company wherever you join us from today. Now, here on Mission 66, we've mentioned before that the Bible isn't primarily a history book, but all of the things that are described are historically accurate. I also believe that the Bible is more about God and his faithfulness than it is about man. Although God's grand design is played out in the history of man here on earth. And we've learned recently about the first kings of Israel, from Saul to David to his son Solomon, and how the kingdom was then divided between north and south during the reign of Solomon's son Rehoboam. Now, the book of Kings, or the books of Kings, I should say, describe the procession of the kings of both the north kingdom, which was called Israel, and the south kingdom, Judah. And really, it's a bit of a study in contrast. So let's read then 1 Kings chapter 15, which begins like this. Now, in the 18th year of King Jeroboam, the son of Nebat, Abijam began to reign over Judah, and he reigned for 3 years in Jerusalem. His mother's name was Maacah, the daughter of Abishalom, and he walked in all the sins that his father did before him. And his heart was not wholly true to the Lord his God, as the heart of David his father. Nevertheless, for David's sake, the Lord his God gave him a lamp in Jerusalem, setting up his son after him and establishing Jerusalem, because David had done what was right in the eyes of the Lord and did not turn aside from anything that he commanded him all the days of his life, except in the matter of Uriah the Hittite. So here we have Abijam ruling in the southern kingdom, Judah, and Jeroboam still in charge of the northern kingdom, Israel. And there was this continual war between the southern and the northern kingdoms. Now, it also remarks that the life of Abijam is recorded in what was called the Book of Chronicles of the Kings of Judah, and that is the same as the books of 1st and 2nd Chronicles of the Bible. However, there was also a book called the Chronicles of the Kings of Israel, and that book no longer exists. We'll get to 1st and 2nd Chronicles after we finished the books of Kings here on Mission 66, noting that the Chronicles in the Bible only deal with the kings of Judah. The only information that we get about the kings of Israel is what is recorded here in the books of 1st and 2nd Kings. And now we get another king of Judah, and his name is Asa, the son of Abijam. And the difference between him and the kings of the north is really what we mean today by a study in contrasts. Let's go from verse 9. In the 20th year of Jeroboam, king of Israel, Asa began to reign over Judah. And he reigned 41 years in Jerusalem. His mother's name was Maacah, the daughter of Abishalom. And Asa did what was right in the eyes of the Lord, as David his father had done. He put away the male cult prostitutes out of the land and removed all the idols that his fathers had made. He also removed Maacah, his mother, from being queen mother because she had made an abominable image for Asherah. And Asa cut down her image and burned it at the brook Kidron. But the high places were not taken away. Nevertheless, the heart of Asa was wholly true to the Lord all his days, and he brought into the house of the Lord the sacred gifts of his father and his own sacred gifts, silver and gold and vessels. Now we get to verses 16 to 24, which is parenthetical, which means it doesn't follow the timeline. You'll see what I mean, because verse 16 goes, there was war between Asa and Baasha, king of Israel, all their days. Baasha, king of Israel, went up against Judah and built Ramah, that he might permit no one to go out or come in to Asa, king of Judah. See, in the timeline, Baasha was not yet king of Israel at this point. As we read further, we'll see that Nadab came before Baasha, but only reigned 2 years before he was killed by Baasha. Now, if we know that, we'll not be confused by what's written here because it's not chronological. Verse 18 says, Then Asa took all the silver and the gold that were left in the treasures of the house of the Lord and the treasures of the king's house, and gave them into the hands of his servants. And King Asa sent them to Ben-Hadad, the son of Tabrimon, the son of Hezion, king of Syria, who lived in Damascus, saying, Let there be a covenant between me and you, as there was between my father and your father. Behold, I'm sending to you a present of silver and gold. Go, break your covenant with Baasha, king of Israel, that he may withdraw from me. And Ben-Hadad listened to King Asa and sent the commanders of his armies against the cities of Israel, conquering Ijon, Dan, Abel-Beth-Maachah, and all of Chinneroth, with all the land of Naphtali. And when Baasha heard of this, he stopped building Ramah, and he lived in Tirzah. Then King Asa made a proclamation to all Judah. None was exempt, and they carried away the stones of Ramah and its timber with which Baasha had been building, and with them King Asa built Geba of Benjamin and Mizpah. Now the rest of all of the acts of Asa, all his might, all that he did, and the cities that he built, are they not written in the book of the Chronicles of the kings of Judah? But in his old age he was diseased in his feet, and Asa slept with his fathers, and was buried with his fathers in the city of David his father. And Jehoshaphat his son reigned in his place. All right then. Well, the Bible paints a very good picture, doesn't it, of Asa? And now, in contrast to that good, strong picture painted there, we come to King Nadab of the northern kingdom Israel in verse 25. Nadab, the son of Jeroboam, began to reign over Israel in the 2nd year of Asa, king of Judah. And he reigned over Israel 2 years, and he did what was evil in the sight of the Lord, and walked in the way of his father, and in his sin which he made Israel to sin. Baasha, the son of Ahijah of the house of Isaac, conspired against him, and Baasha struck him down at Gibbethon, which belonged to the Philistines, for Nadab and all Israel were laying siege to Gibbethon. So Baasha killed him in the 3rd year of Asa, king of Judah, and reigned in his place. And as soon as he was king, he killed all the house of Jeroboam. He left to the house of Jeroboam not one that breathed until he had destroyed it, according to the word of the Lord that he spoke by his servant Ahijah the Shilonite. And that was a prophecy which we'd heard about in the last episode. And so Baasha kills Nadab, and there's war between Asa and Baasha, king of Israel, who the text says did evil in the sight of the Lord. And now as we reach 1 Kings chapter 16, there is another prophecy. It says this: "And the word of the Lord came to Jehu the son of Hanani against Baasha, saying, Since I exalted you out of the dust and made you leader over my people Israel, and you have walked in the way of Jeroboam, and have made my people Israel to sin, provoking me to anger with their sins, behold, I will utterly sweep away Baasha and his house, and I will make your house like the house of Jeroboam, the son of Nebat. Anyone belonging to Baasha who dies in the city, the dogs shall eat, and any one of his who dies in the field, the birds of the heavens shall eat." Now that is an important prophecy because it foretells the doom of all the future kings that descend from Baasha. Also a side note here, the prophet Jehu is not to be confused here with Jehu, the king of Israel, who we'll get to in the coming days of Mission 66. And so next in the line of the king of Israel, or the kings of Israel, comes Elah. Verse 8, chapter 16 says, "In the 26th year now of Asa king of Judah, Elah, the son of Baasha, begins to reign over Israel in Tirzah, and he reigned 2 years. But his servant Zimri, commander of half his chariots, conspired against him. When he was at Tirzah, drinking himself drunk in the house of Asa, who was over the household in Tirzah, Zimri came in, struck him down, and killed him in the 27th year of Asa, king of Judah, and reigned in his place. When Zimri began to reign, as soon as he had seated himself on his throne, he struck down all the house of Baasha. He did not leave him a single male of his relatives or his friends. Thus Zimri destroyed all the house of Baasha, according to the word of the Lord, which he spoke against Baasha by Jehu the prophet. For all the sins of Baasha and the sins of Elah his son, which they sinned and which they made Israel to sin, provoking the Lord God of Israel to anger with their idols. Now the rest of the acts of Elah and all that he did, are they not written in the book of the Chronicles of the kings of Israel? Again, the Chronicles of the kings of Israel exist no longer, so far as we're aware. And then this is verse 15, which says, "In the 27th year of Asa king of Judah, Zimri reigned 7 days in Tirzah. Now the troops were encamped against Gibbethon, which belonged to the Philistines. And the troops who were encamped heard it said, Zimri has conspired, and he has killed the king. Therefore all Israel made Omri, the commander of the army, king over Israel that day in the camp. So Omri went up from Gibbethon, and all Israel with him, and they besieged Tirzah. And when Zimri saw that the city was taken, he went into the citadel of the king's house, and burned the king's house over him with fire, and died, because of his sins that he committed, doing evil in the sight of the Lord, walking in the way of Jeroboam, and for his sin which he committed, making Israel to sin." So Zimri had a short reign, 7 days to be exact. And then Omri takes over in Israel, but he is not in the royal line. He's voted in, shall we say, verse 25. But how would Omri respond? What kind of king would he be like? Well, he was going to be like this, because verse 25 says, Omri did what was evil in the sight of the Lord, and did more evil than all who were before him. For he walked in all the way of Jeroboam the son of Nebat, and in the sins that he made Israel to sin, provoking the Lord, the God of Israel, to anger by their idols. Now the rest of the acts of Omri that he did, and the might that he showed, are they not written in the book of the Chronicles of the Kings of Israel? And Omri slept with his fathers and was buried in Samaria, and Ahab his son reigned in his place. Now Ahab will stand out as, well, frankly, one of the worst of the kings of the northern kingdom Israel. We're going to see why. Let's read the last part of chapter 16 from verse 30. Ahab, the son of Omri, did evil in the sight of the Lord more than all who were before him. And as if it had been a light thing for him to walk in the sins of Jeroboam the son of Nebat, he took for his wife Jezebel, the daughter of Ethbaal, king of the Sidonians, and went and served Baal and worshipped him. He erected an altar for Baal in the house of Baal, which he built in Samaria. And Ahab made an Asherah. Ahab did more to provoke the Lord, the God of Israel, to anger than all the kings of Israel who were before him. And his wife Jezebel becomes synonymous with evil, treachery, and villainous, power-hungry monarchs. It's worth mentioning also that the last verse 34, tells of a man called Hiel of Bethel, who tries to rebuild the city of Jericho, and 2 of his sons die during the construction process, and that in fulfillment of a prophetic word of the Lord spoken by Joshua the son of Nun many years previously, after Jericho had been destroyed.
This is Mission 66, and we're here with our teacher, John Matthews, who is leading us through today's look in the Bible. And you know, friend, I cannot really emphasize how important it is for this message to get into the world, this message of hope and love and redemption that is found in Jesus Christ and is threaded throughout the Bible. And you know, Mission 66 is heard in several languages around the world, and it is because of your prayers and your financial support that we can continue this ministry globally. But if you would like to give a gift to this ministry, friend, today visit mission66.org. That's mission66.org. Well, friend, I'm Esther, and of course I'm here to ask some clarifying questions to what we've read in the Bible. So, John, one thing that may be confusing for us following along in these 2 chapters is perhaps trying to keep up with who is king over which kingdom. So perhaps there is a simple way that we can remember all of this information?
Not really, Esther. Usually you just have to take the time to go through it. But you know, for today's episode, let's perhaps put it this way. All of the kings of the northern kingdom Israel, which we've come across today, well, they lived and reigned during the rule of Asa, king of Judah. So it was Asa reigning in the south, while in the north, Nadab, Baasha, Elah, Zimri, Tibni, Omri, and Ahab, 7 of them, were all kings of Israel during the lifespan of Asa.
All right. Well, I suppose that will have to do just in terms of trying to get a holistic picture of the kings of these kingdoms. Now, you know, it seems that Jeroboam and all the kings who followed him had this huge part in leading the nation of Israel astray, which was quite unfortunate. How exactly would you say did Jeroboam and these other kings make Israel to sin?
Well, Look, as leadership goes, so often follows the people and their behaviours. But more than that, God considers the leader to be responsible for the condition of the nation as a whole. And so the leader's sins become their sins and they're involved in them. In the same way, God considered Adam to be the head of the human race. So when he sins, he brings guilt on the entire human race. Of course, that's why we need Jesus. We need his saving grace and his forgiveness and his redemption. And can't we thank him so much that he died on the cross, sent by his Father to this earth. He walked this earth that we walk on, lived a perfect life, demonstrated the perfection of God here on earth among us by loving God and loving people as no one else had ever loved. And he died on the cross, and 3 days again he conquered death, and our sins were removed if we ask forgiveness to him, because he took the punishment for those sins, and they were removed as far as the east is from the west. And so when we come to him and we surrender and declare our commitment to him, you know what God's able to do, Esther? He is able to bring generational curses to an end. And he is able to end the punishment and the judgment for our sins, because he took that punishment and judgment upon himself, not in part, but in full.
Oh, yeah. Praise the Lord for the freedom that is found in Jesus Christ, where things like generational curses are broken over our lives when we come into relationship with him. Wow. But, I'm just thinking once again, John, in terms of the responsibility of the people, surely they do bear some of that as well as it pertains to their sins, right?
Well, look, we do. The responsibility for my sin belongs to me. Now, whether I recognize it and own it is a different thing, but the responsibility nonetheless belongs to me. And you have Jeroboam. He didn't force Israel to sin. They simply followed a bad role model. As sin often works its way through, that is how it works. Nobody forces us to sin either. We are sinners by inheritance. We are born into sin. We are born sinful. But we're also sinners by choice, because we participate in sin in our lives at times very willingly. Ellen White once said, "Through indulgence in sin, self-respect is destroyed. And when that is gone, respect for others is lessened. When sin is cherished, it can, in the end, produce nothing but unhappiness." And without God's help, we are ultimately at the mercy of sin, whether we realize it or not. The strength and the power, you see, to overcome and to change, it comes from him. But we must be wholly willing for his transforming hand to mould our surrendered souls.
You are absolutely right, John. And humility is such an important ingredient in acknowledging just how desperately we are in need of Jesus' saving grace. It's so important. But you know what? Let's go ahead now and segue into verse 13 of chapter 15, because it also mentions King Asa removing Maacah from her position as queen mother. Perhaps you can go into what that all means.
Well, look, yeah, the Hebrew word Esther can mean mother, grandmother, ancestor, or somebody who is in the genealogical line. So here you have Maacah, the mother of Abijah, but the grandmother of Asa, king of Judah. So when verse 10 says his mother's name was Maacah, it means she was actually a grandmother. The point being that she made this repulsive idol, and Asa's devotion to God, well, it was a pretty courageous thing to do, wasn't it, as a relatively young king compared to her, but not afraid to confront her on it, call this abomination out, and indeed remove her from her status as queen mother.
Yeah, that was a pretty brave move from Asa. Now, speaking of Omri's reign, was it really that important? I mean, is his name that significant at this particular point in history?
Well, look, yeah, King Omri, despite being a very evil king and disobedient to God's standards, did leave his mark on Israel's history. He reigned just 12 years, but it was a significant time. Archaeologists actually discovered a stone in Moab with inscriptions that reference international politics, and Omri's mentioned on that Moabite stone, affirming the historical accuracy of this biblical text. And one of the things that Omri did was to buy a hill from a man called Shema and built this famous city of Samaria there. And that became the renowned capital of the northern kingdom, just as Jerusalem was the capital of Judah. So Samaria in time becomes a symbol of human ambition. In addition to being the Northern Kingdom's seat of authority, it was a pretty resilient old place as well. It lasted a long time until its destruction in 722 BC. Also, Omri was the father of Ahab, which gave rise to a dynasty that became the high point of Baal worship. Perhaps low point is probably a more accurate way to describe it.
Yeah. Well, John, thank you so much for these explanations. I think they're so helpful to us in understanding what we're reading, particularly in 1 Kings chapter 15 and 16. Now, can you give us a condensed version of the events that we've learned about today?
Yeah, let's do that, Esther. Well, look, we've covered the monarchies of Israel and Judah during the 10th and the 9th centuries BC before Christ. And these two chapters highlight the reigns of various kings in Israel and Judah, emphasizing the consequences of their faithfulness to, or on the other hand, their rebellion against God. Abijam and Asa, kings of Judah, demonstrated levels of devotion. Abijam followed sinful ways, yet God preserves his lineage for the sake of David. Asa, however, commits himself fully to the Lord, removing his own grandmother from her status because she had made an idol. And even though he fails to abolish the idolatrous high places, Asa's reign is marked by reform, trust and reliance on God. Meanwhile, in Israel, Nadab, Baasha, Elah, Zimri, Omri and Ahab perpetuated this unbroken pattern of sin and idolatry, which led to divine judgment. Ahab, notably provoking God's anger by worshipping Baal, urged on by a woman known for her evil character. No other way to describe it. Her name was Jezebel. And the chapters here underscore the importance of obedience to God and knowing that he has our best interests at heart, along with the danger of idolatry and indeed the enduring generational consequences of sin.
Well, it is on that note that we come to the end of today's Mission 66 episode. But hey, we're looking forward to next time as we're going to move into the next chapters of 1 Kings, where we introduce the prophet Elijah during the times of the kings of Israel and Judah. Well, I'm Esther for John and our entire team saying, may God bless you and thank you for listening to Mission 66.
As Mission 66 comes to a close, be sure to download your free study guide at mission66.org. Deepen your daily devotion with insights from each episode, and let John and Esther lead you through the scriptures. Get your study guide at mission66.org and be prepared for our next episode. There, you can also connect with us, ask questions, or donate to help Mission 66's worldwide outreach. Head to mission66.org. Mission 66 is made possible through Transworld Radio in partnership with Dr. Luis Sayao.